Welcome back everyone to another episode of The Road Chose Me. My name's Dan, and on today's episode, it's time to finish off the review series before I say goodbye to the Gladiator. And so on today's episode, I'm going to talk about the things that I did wrong, the mistakes I made, the things I wish I did differently on this build. So we've been living out of it full time now for a year, all the way around Australia, just about 60,000 kilometers to all the highlights, all the remote wilderness tracks. What has it been like to live in? It's been great overall, but there are definitely some mistakes I made, definitely things I'm keeping a list I'm going to do differently next time. So if you want to learn from my mistakes, if you want to build a vehicle better than this one, stick around. Let's get into all the details right now. So without a doubt, the biggest mistake I made on this build is related to the batwing awning that I installed. And don't get me wrong, the batwing awning from Rhino Rack, it has been fantastic, and I think there's a very good chance I'll have one on my next vehicle. My mistake, my problem comes in where I mounted it. And so this all stems from me designing this vehicle while I was in Canada, then while I was in lockdown, and then here in Australia, it became really hard to get parts, and it was just really difficult to kind of coordinate and organize everything. And so what I ended up doing, the whole thing here, is that the awning is mounted to the roof rack. And so obviously that means it's forward. The awning you can see ends here. It ends about 2 feet from the end of my canopy. And so because it's a batwing awning, it basically pivots around this point. So it comes all the way out and then around to the back of the Jeep. But what it means is, because I'm 2 feet short here, I miss out on a bunch of coverage over there in the far corner. What would be more ideal is if this pivot point was right here at the end of the canopy, and then the maximum amount of awning would be here on the side of the Jeep, and more importantly, at the back of the Jeep, especially where the kitchen is. And so this ended up happening because when I designed this thing, this canvas canopy, it was way too complicated to make it hold weight. And so we made the quick decision to say it won't be load bearing. I'm never going to mount anything onto it. That's why there's nothing on the top of it, the roof, the surfboards, all of that stuff. They were always on the roof rack. They were never even touching the canvas. And so that meant that the awning also couldn't be bolted to this thing. And of course they have to be separate too. I can't bolt something to this and to the roof rack because they need to flex independently. The bed of the Gladiator flexes separately to the cab. So anyway, the whole problem is this pivot point is essentially in the wrong spot. If I had my time over again, I would absolutely move it back, and I would find a way to mount the awning to whatever kind of canopy I have on the back. It's as simple as that. It's totally my mistake. Lesson learned. The pivot point on your batwing, you want it at the very, very back corner of your vehicle, especially when you're using the back of your vehicle as house central, like I do with my kitchen and my drawers and all of that stuff. There we go, lesson learned. Another problem that came with living out of this vehicle, and this is again totally my mess up, is I didn't think hard enough about where to transport and store our clothes. So I was so focused on the suspension, on the kitchen, on the lockbox. All my camera gear and all that had really great storage, but our clothes were a complete disaster. So basically Katie and I both had a bag, like this big bag full of all my clothes. Mine ended up down in the passenger footwell. Katie's was kind of up here on the remains of the passenger seat. And the reason we kept the 40% of the rear seat, or one seat in the back, is because I really wanted my family to come with me. I really wanted friends to come with us. And a couple of times that did happen. We did transport a third person. So we needed the seat intact. But the problem became, well, how do you use the storage space, that is the seat when there isn't another passenger? And so we just kind of threw our clothes bags in there, and they were pretty much always a disaster. Katie's clothes ended up like a waterfall down in mine. Mine were always full of kind of dirt and sand if we threw our shoes or our flip-flops in there. It just didn't work. It was not enjoyable. I basically dreaded going in and getting clothes out. So often I would just wear the same shirt for a few days in a row because that was easier than going and getting another one out. So what would I do differently next time? What's my lesson learned? This is a hard one because I still really want to keep that seat. So how do you have really efficient clothes storage, but also have the seat? I think what I would do is buy or build some sort of collapsible storage so that you can use the full height of the seat, the depth, the width, but then maybe it has shelves, you know, whether it's kind of a fabric thing, I guess you hang them up like for shoe storage, something that lets us use more of this volume, but also keeps everything really organized. And then hopefully there would be a way, if it's time for a passenger to jump on board, you can remove that thing, maybe strap it in the back or temporarily strap it on top of the lockbox, some way to make the seat usable again, but then also turn it back into like really functional clothes storage. So definitely when you're living full-time in a vehicle, it's nice to have access to your clothes. It's nice for them to be clean and organized so you can just reach in and grab whatever it is you want. You don't want to have to just dig. And every time I dig through this bag, I pretty much have to upend the entire thing to find what I want. Really didn't work. Next time, more thought into clothes storage. For the next thing that I wish I had done differently is here at the back of the Jeep, I didn't add a backup light. So this Jeep does have a reversing camera. This is it right here. And during the day, it's amazing. It helps so much to be able to reverse this thing and get it within an inch of touching the rear tow hooks. I really like it. I've become like dependent on it. That's great during the day. The problem comes at night. When you go to reverse, the reversing lights on this, I guess, are not very good. And so the backup screen tries to compensate and it just makes the screen insanely bright. The problem with that is, first of all, the screen doesn't really show you very much. You can't see these things anymore, so it's not really helping you. But worse than that is it ruins your night vision. So even when you look in the rear view mirrors, you can't really see anything because the screen in the center console now is just so bright. So at night, often when I'm reversing, I find I have to put my hand over the screen, sometimes even both of them, to then try and see something in my side mirrors. So it's kind of ironic because on my Africa Jeep, I did actually install a backup light. And to be honest, I didn't really think it was that useful. I didn't realize how much I was using it because when it's on, it's just, you can reverse and you can see what you need to, but you kind of don't notice it. So I kind of was being like a bit cheap or a bit fast when I built this, and I thought, oh, I don't really need to add a backup light. I'm sure it's adequate. Well, it turns out that's not true. So next time I build an Overland vehicle, without question, I'm going to add a backup light. And so lots of aftermarket bumpers, they have provision for that. So you get it down nice and low, you install a nice good floodlight, and it'll light up everything behind you. Probably then the camera will work better. And even if it doesn't, at least then the side mirrors will work better. So a backup light, I've decided, is a must. And so another major failing or thing that I really don't like about this build are the drawers that I've installed here at the back. And so these drawers, they ended up being a necessity because of my lack of understanding about how a pickup truck works. So when I bought this thing, you know, the reason that I wanted a pickup truck is because it has the ability to carry more fuel and more water than I ever have before. That was really my major focus. The kitchen being a huge big pull-out drawer, that gave me the best kitchen I've ever had, contains the fridge, all my food, all my spices, utensils, all that. They're in this drawer, that's great. But then I had this huge deep space. How do I access that space? How do I use it? Kind of, I think drawers are the only way. So drawers, I think, are a necessary evil, but in this case, these drawers are terrible. And they're terrible for a whole bunch of reasons. I'm not even going to tell you what brand they are. This is an Aussie brand. This is kind of the stuff that Aussies buy for their four-wheel drives. They're branded as heavy duty. They're tough. You know, they do have a lock on them, which is kind of nice, but that's where the good features end. So I'll run through the problems and you'll see what I mean as time goes on. The first problem with them is they're insanely heavy. They're made out of steel, which I guess is tough, like Australians desire, but they are so heavy, the two of them combined are more weight, you know, than I can afford to spare with my payload. So remember too, none of us really want to actually carry drawers. That's wasted payload. You just want the convenience that they bring. So they're so heavy, in fact, on the website, I just spent half an hour. It doesn't even list how heavy they are. But I remember when I had to pick them up to put them in there, it's not easy. So first of all, they're insanely heavy. Second of all, they're already corroding. There's quite a bit of corrosion on this side on the metal, even though they're only a year old. I think that's terrible. It means they're cheap. The other one is Obviously, while driving the Jeep, I couldn't hear that, thankfully, but they just flop around like this. The latch on them doesn't positively engage them. I've actually already modified them to try and minimize the amount they can rattle like that. They still rattle anyway. The next thing is, given the outside dimension, the inside dimensions are actually tiny. We're losing like 3 inches on all sides. So the amount of storage you get, the two of them combined, I'm gonna guess it's somewhere around maybe 60% or 70% of the outer dimension volume. Even under here, I'm losing volume. You can see there's a huge gap here where you can't really put stuff, and the way that they're braced and supported, if you put anything tall in this drawer, it just jams and the drawer doesn't close properly. So you lose a whole bunch of space. So overall, you can see I'm not happy with these drawers. They weren't very expensive, which I guess is a bonus, but I absolutely would not recommend anyone to buy these things. And in the future, I will never do this again. I suppose if I have a pickup truck, I'm going to need some way to access this stuff. I don't know though, I still am in two minds about pickup trucks. Like I said in a previous video, living in there is a bummer because you end up with all this dust and you're kind of contained to the size of the bed. But then living outside of it, you're gonna have to have drawers and things like this. So I'm still not 100% sure what to do. Not these drawers, that's for sure. While we're back here too, I just want to mention the water tank. Somebody asked in the video, how has the water system been? So overall, it has been fantastic. Once again, this system that I designed, I really, really like it. Essentially the same on my Africa Jeep, been flawless. I'm sure I'll do the same thing again. So there's a whole video about how I designed it and built it. Check that out. Very happy with it. That being said though, I don't love the placement. So this is the water tank here. It's kind of straddling the hump in the wheel well. So it does make use of that space that otherwise isn't very useful. But at the same time, it's kind of using up our prime storage space, you know, in the bed of the pickup, where I wish we could have other things that are out of the dust and out of the sun and all of that stuff. So on my Africa Jeep, I managed to mount the water tank up underneath. That was fantastic. Now I realize how good it was. I really want to do that again in the future. Definitely is challenging though. On this vehicle, I mounted a fuel tank in that space, which I really love. So having all the fuel underneath is great. I really want to find a way in the future to also get the water tank underneath. So there's some challenges there. Probably what I would have to do is modify the stock exhaust, maybe put on a really small muffler, move that out of the way or make it really thin and try and mount a rear tank there somewhere. Possibly I'd love to put one where the spare tire is, but then of course, where do you put the spare tire? So I don't actually know how, but I really want to get the water tank underneath next time and free up all of this space simply for more storage for other things. But other than that, the water tank, I'll do it again. Same setup, same filter, same pump, but relocate the tank. So as always, I hope the video has been helpful and I hope it helps you design and build your own overland vehicle. And realize too, as always, it's not about your suspension, it's not about tire size, it's not about how many horsepower the engine has, it's about your living systems. What is it like to live full time in a vehicle as your house for months and months that turns into years and years? So it's actually much more important to focus on what the living systems are than the four-wheel driving or the kind of base vehicle features. Keep that in mind as you're designing and building your own vehicle. I guarantee it'll have a lot more impact on your happiness. So if the video has been helpful, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and of course, I'm learning all of these lessons because I'm just about to start building an entirely new vehicle for entirely new adventures in an entirely new part of the world. And if you'd like to get details on all of that, behind the scenes details are coming to my supporters over on Patreon. So there's a link in the description. If you head over Patreon, you'll see all the information and I'll start posting details, renderings, ideas, concepts, and then the progress as that vehicle build gets underway over on Patreon right now. Don't forget to check that out. So thanks again for watching. Have fun out there and maybe I'll bump into you on the road.